I remember that even as a kid, I used to be really annoyed at the concept of false positivity by people who kind of have this constant veneer of like trying to push the idea that everyone around them was having a great time, that there were no issues, there were no things that were bothering people under the surface and needed to be talked about. And it took me a while to realize that the reason other people didn't say anything about this is not because they didn't necessarily notice it, but more because they were afraid of the social consequences of pointing it out. As I got a bit older, I noticed it was a bit more nuanced than that there were actually a lot of interplays between people who were kind of trying to bring up the subject of, what might they really be feeling at that moment. But it was always kind of getting shut down in various ways, or, you get older and you kind of have more permission to speak against these things, but there's also more of like a standard for you to also kind of have to believe in them yourself, that it's not enough to simply stay quiet and let things go on, but you kind of have to slowly adopt this belief system that actually numbs you to the basic perception that we're not really living our authentic lives, we're not expressing our authentic selves. And this seems to contradict so much about what we strive for as a society. It seems to contradict our most basic goals. Though generally I might be inclined to say, sure, this inauthenticity is just a compromise. It's needed for the state of affairs. It's needed for things to continue as they are. And that is fine within a certain limitation, Overton window, if you will. But I'm not feeling so inclined to say that anymore. I'm feeling more inclined to say that the fundamental failure of our society is embedded in this very idea that we have to continue lying to ourselves. We have to continue, that we have to perpetuate these lies, and not just to ourselves, but to our children even. We need to make sure they believe all the right lies. And this is kind of the fundamentalist conservative principle is, maybe society isn't perfect, but we just need to maintain a certain level of consistency to maintain society where it is. But I would make the case that a society that requires that in the long term, doesn't develop from that at all, is not really worth maintaining. And if we insist that it is, if we insist that we continue doing this forever, as we do, then I feel like what's going to inevitably happen is our priorities are going to get shuffled around our false sense of self. We're going to kind of start to believe our own lies, and this is actually what happens to a lot of psychopaths. They create this fiction about themselves that is so profound, so invasive to the way that they think, feel, approach reality. And what ultimately ends up happening is they lose their essential sense of self. It gets replaced by their ability to react to social stimuli the way that others are expecting them to. or the way that is advantageous for them. And that's actually kind of tragic. I mean, I wouldn't sympathize with them in the sense that it's not pragmatic to do so, but that's kind of sad. If you can only derive value from external gratification, external validation, to the point where you're kind of gaming yourself. And what I mean by that is you essentially are playing your part so well that you forget that you're playing a part. You construct a false image of some kind of a deified ideal of what society wants out of you, and you offer to that your own consciousness, and the result is you've basically put yourself in the matrix at that point, metaphorically speaking. And that's hell. I mean, to put it simply, to create a false ideal, live up to that, and start believing in that false ideal as a surrogate for your actual needs as a human being. And apart from just one's sense of identity, this also is tied into our incentive structure as a society. It's tied into algorithms, business formations. It's tied into basically everywhere that you can find power structures, competition between people, and we don't want to think about anything outside of our own selfish, self-serving value system. And we don't realize how detrimental this is. We don't realize that it's really not that hard to create a world where everything works cohesively, everyone's needs are met, and we can actually have experiences that are not just so one-dimensional as like spending money on some expensive getaway. And how do you do this? You do this by being your authentic self as much as you can. You do this by connecting with people and realizing that if we were to collectively work against the kind of emotional abuse and trauma that we've been put into this box just to make us work and do nothing else and think about nothing else but this one-dimensional goal, we would eventually start to see a transition to a society that's more functional. We would eventually start to see a transition to a society that actually operates by our own true will. And all that takes is like this consistent sense of authenticity and learning to trust other people instead of being distrustful of everyone all the time, which that's just like this reptilian brain instinct that's embedded in the back of our mind that we can't get rid of. And it's always been holding us back. I mean, maybe there was a time when you had to be more worried about your safety, but people are so paranoid about everything. And why is that? Well, there's a lack of authenticity in the first place. If you establish that authenticity, then you can move on to something that's more resembling trust. And then you can start to have something resembling a functional society. And like, I know I focus on systems a lot, but there's a lot more to the world than systems and dismantling or optimizing them. There's also this psychological aspect, which has to do with like the stuff I said in the Operation Virginia Woolf video. Like, do you trust your neighbor enough to loan you a stick of butter to make some cookies? You know, just simple stuff like that. But if we're able to do things like that, we could have like this, as I said in the video, you can have like a social safety net, and you can use this to make everyone's life better at the detriment of no one, because it only takes from people who have more than they currently need and give to those who have less than they currently need. And then there's an equilibrium, it balances out. So the psychological aspect of learning to trust each other in this way could feed into a kind of revolutionary spirit. It could feed into an actual high trust society where people not only trust each other, but also value each other. If people value each other, then we don't even have to worry about all these economic problems, because they're going to sort themselves out, because people have to realize that the economic problems actually are not just like this isolated thing. They also come from our essential inability to see the value that other people bring. Can you imagine how terrible your life would be if there was no one to make all the music you like, no one to make all the TV shows, no one to make all the food, no one to build your house? All these things come from other people. And when other people feel appreciated, when other people are contributed to in ways that don't just focus on like this very oversimplified way where the only thing they can think about is money and survival, then you could start to move towards a society that's built on trust. You could start to build the fundamental anarchist principle of a voluntary society, which is what we should be doing under any case. I mean, if society isn't voluntary, why are we even doing it? I think it's actually kind of hilarious that people don't understand at all what anarchists mean when they say they want a voluntary society where people feel like contributing. And the reason they don't understand this is because life under capitalism is so shit that you can't even comprehend wanting to participate in a system that works for everyone. It seems alien. It seems an impossible thing to even conceive of. But this is how society has operated for like thousands of years. Like before, modern history tends to begin to take place, is you lived in a primal society and people did what they could to contribute because they cared about everyone in that society. And now you only care about like 5 people at most, really, like honestly care about, not just talking about your friends on social media or whatever, but you should be able to effectively care about everyone, just knowing that everyone can contribute something valuable to the world. And that probably sounds even more alien than the voluntary society thing. Like valuing everyone? Can't do that. But no, I think pretty much everyone, with the exception of, horrible people who do horrible things to hurt people. You don't have to be friends with literally everyone, but I think most of the human population, I don't think this is an exaggeration, could be contributing value to the whole network, and by proxy yourself, because the people who serve the people who make the things you like are being served. Well, it's a cycle, etc. But the main reason we don't think this way is because we're geared for primarily survival, and we don't see other people as opportunities to make our lives better. We see them as competition for this linear drive towards money. So tying this back into the original point, I think it's the false positivity which essentially prevents us from actualizing our true selves and realizing that there's more to life than the endless competitive superstructure of capitalism. And part of that is coming to contention with the fact that a lot of our relationships hold a lot of deep underlying tension in them. And this is stemming from an artificial competitive drive which only exists because we don't know how to have authentic experiences. Additionally, I'm going to be outlining some more practical ways to approach this problem in a future operation-based video, which I'll link somewhere here. I hope that made some sense.
thought that